All right, guys. Our next guest is an MMA legend and a previous UFC light heavyweight and heavyweight champion. You also know him from such movies as The Expendables, Scorpion King 2, Big Stan. He joins us here back on the program. The natural Randy Couture. Welcome back to Submission Radio. It's been a while, man.
It has been a while. How you guys been?
Very good, very good. Missing you with every day, Randy. And we saw on Instagram that you got that you got back on the saddle the other day. You went on a bit of a horse ride with some friends. Talk to us about your horse riding skills, because we're imagining backflips and riding on two horses at once when seeing you riding around. Is that an accurate assessment?
No, absolutely not. I'm doing my best to keep my ass in the saddle. I love horses. When I left Oregon 10 years ago, I sold my horses and my trailer and all my stuff. I kept my saddles and all that, but I absolutely miss my horses. They're a very relaxing thing. And now I end up on a motorcycle instead of a horse. I kind of do the same thing, to unplug and unwind. And there's something about having the wind in your face and the sun in your back that makes the rest of the world go away. So, but I definitely miss the personality of my horses.
We also saw on Instagram that a week ago you met with some more members of Congress in D.C. First off, we noticed you were wearing an impressive scarf to the meeting with a nice shade of green and some sort of reddish color. Was the scarf a sneaky persuasion tool for the meeting, Randy? Be honest with us.
Well, the scarf is actually a really cool scarf. It's a flag. It's the American flag, kind of subdued, with military green and then red and blue with white stars. But it's a little more subdued than the regular flag. And I wouldn't want to wear that around my neck anyway. But but I don't know. I guess I'm a scarf guy. I don't know what to tell you. I wear them a lot, especially in the winter. It was cold as heck in D.C. when we were there, so the scarf worked for me.
Yeah, we respect it. So in all seriousness, though, how did it go? And are there any updates, especially from your meeting from Congress?
Again, the second trip out with the MMAFA, the Fighters Association, and very well received with all the congressmen on both sides of the aisle. It's pretty much an easy sell when you got guys like myself, John Fitch, Ben Askren, all there speaking to congressmen, letting them know what our real world, real experience has been with the contracts, with dealing with the promotions in mixed martial arts and the flaw that is the system being used right now, and why the Ollie Act needs to be expanded to include combative sports athletes. We picked up 8 sponsors for the bill. 2 of them Democratic. Obviously, Joe Kennedy has been one of the founding members of the bill, with Mark Wayne Mullins from Oklahoma. Those 2 guys have kind of spearheaded this whole thing. So we have six Republican sponsors now, and 2 Democratic sponsors. A couple more Democratic sponsors that we spoke with that I think are going to sign on as well. There's no opposition from anyone to get through what used to be called the Energy and Commerce Committee. They've changed the name now, but without anybody kind of being opposed to this thing, it may get suppressed and put on the fast track to get to a vote sooner than we expected originally, which is all good news.
I mean, a lot of people listening right now, they don't really understand how it all works. And it's fascinating, the process that it has to go through. But, I mean, for someone who's listening right now, who's wondering, well, how soon can it be? I mean, can it be a thing that comes through at some point this year, or do you think it's still something that's a couple of years away?
Well, we expected it would probably take it at least until June, especially with the transition going on. But obviously the transition's moving faster than people expected. Again, with the chairman, the vice chairman, and the senior member not opposing the language in the bill and what we're trying to do, that gives it an opportunity to be fast tracked. So we're potentially looking within the next 2 to 3 months that we'll get this to a vote instead of waiting 6 months till June. Once it's in a vote, there'll be a transition. If it obviously gets approved, there'll be a transition period for the sport it doesn't happen overnight. You're not just going to flip a switch and change the system overnight. It's going to take some time to transition and comply basically with the federal legislation. And I don't know how much you guys know or understand what's going on, but the flaw basically that's being used in mixed martial arts is that the promoter and the sanctioning body in mixed martial arts are the same person. It's a lot of power. It definitely skews the leverage and power in favor of the promoter, who is also the sanctioning body setting up the rankings and the titles that we as athletes, hoped and aspire to fight for. That leverage and power allows them to sign fighters to very exclusive, very limiting contracts, signing away their ancillary rights and many other things in perpetuity forever, that normally under the Ali Act with boxing would not be allowed. So that's the biggest thing that the Ali Act does for us as mixed martial artists. Is it changes that structure. It separates those powers.
I'm wondering, Randy, how much... I can't imagine you walking anywhere near the UFC and really having conversations, but what do you think the UFC thinks about this? Because from everything that we know about the Ali Act, it would completely change the UFC's business practices. What do you think's going through their mind as this Ali Act sort of seems to be nearing?
It wouldn't just change the UFC's business practices. It would change the business practices for the entire sport.
Sure, yeah.
All the promotions are using the same flawed system. And I mean, yeah, again, I think if it gets passed, there's going to be a transition period where the promotions are going to have to decide whether they want to remain a sanctioning body that sets rankings and titles, or if they want to be a promoter that promotes fighters to fight for those rankings and titles. And it would then the change would create an open, competitive market. Right now, it's a very closed, anti-competitive market. 90% of the funds that are generated in our sport right now are coming through the UFC. So obviously, they don't want to see this change. They've had a license to basically print money off the backs of fighters since 2000, since the last 16 years. Certainly, the new owners maybe didn't understand or didn't see what was potentially coming, but I absolutely believe the Fertittas knew what was coming with the class action lawsuit, and then now the fighters uniting with the Fighters Association and trying to get the Ali Act amended to protect us like it does boxers. So I'm sure it's got to be concerning to them. They are lobbying. They've hired lobbyists, and my understanding is they've spent over $1 million with lobby groups trying to shut this down and trying to spin it and convince people that it doesn't need to be changed, that it should just stay the same, which in my opinion is a lot tougher position to sell. But, it's going to be an interesting year for sure.
I mean, a big moment last year was when you gave a testimonial at the congressional subcommittee hearing on MMA. And according to Mark Wayne Mullen, who's the congressman sponsoring the Muhammad Ali Act, Expansion Act, the UFC tried to influence a congressional committee to blackball you from speaking at the hearing. I mean, was it a relief that you got an opportunity to do the testimonial? And also, how hard was it for you to do? I mean, it's a big pressure situation to be in that position and giving a testimony like that.
Well, it was certainly a bit nerve-wracking. I jokingly said afterwards, I think I'd rather be punched in the face. But they definitely tried to influence the committee and said that they weren't going to attend if I was allowed to speak. Obviously, the committee wasn't swayed by that. They were there. They did speak about their drug testing programs and the health and safety measures that they take for athletes in the sport, which are all, big concerns, certainly with all the things going on with traumatic brain injury and CTE and those sorts of things through football and some of the other contact sports. MMA is certainly not exempt from those concerns, but I was allowed to speak. I felt, good about it. I think it was well received on both sides of the issue, for Republicans and Democrats alike. Seem to understand where we're coming from, why we feel like this needs to happen, and create a free and open competitive marketplace for us as mixed martial artists give us a little more leverage to negotiate our value in the marketplace, which are all things that don't happen right now in mixed martial arts. Probably the guy that's holding the UFC's feet to the fire the most right now is Conor McGregor. And it's interesting that he and Nate Diaz have just gone out and gotten boxing licenses in the state of California. When I got my first mixed martial arts professional license, it assigned me a national number. The same thing happens with boxers. The difference is when Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor got their boxing licenses, that national number assigned them protections that are granted boxers under the Muhammad Ali Act. Mm-hmm. I can guarantee you that both Conor McGregor and Diaz signed a contract that specifically forbids them from boxing, grappling, or wrestling in any other show without express consent from the UFC. So right away, by getting a boxing license, they created a conflict for the UFC in that their contract is basically illegal under the Ali Act protections.
Yeah, I mean, it's great that you bring up Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz. John S. Nash of Bloody Elbow wrote a really good article last year, basically giving the blueprint to how Conor McGregor can use that Ali Act to get around his UFC contract and, fight Mayweather, because while both Nate and Conor have boxing license, or Nate's on the way, Mayweather is the big fight. There's a few things that McGregor has to do, and going off his article, he's got to apply for that boxing license, which he's done. Second was to announce the fight, preferably do it in California or New York. And then thirdly, he's got to immediately file for declaratory relief against the UFC side of the Muhammad Ali Reform Boxing Act's provision against coercive contracts, to make the claim that the restrictive provision in the UFC's contract is restraining McGregor from boxing, and that he's a licensed boxer under an applicable boxing commission failing under jurisdiction in the ABC. Bit of a mouthful, but that's basically from John S. Nash. This could be a really costly process, but do you think McGregor will be able to pull it off? And knowing what you know about the UFC, do you think they will, rather than having the risk of him doing this by himself, do you think they'll try and attach their trailer and just say, look, we'll just all do this together?
I mean, we've already seen a complete 180 from Dana. Rather than fighting Conor, where he was stripped of his 145-pound title and even dropped out of the top 10 rankings in that weight class, having not lost a fight, I think was backlash for his public voice about the boxing match. We've already seen Dana do a complete 180, and now he's offering both Mayweather and McGregor significant amounts of money to be involved and promote that boxing match. So I think Nash's estimation is exactly right, which is exactly why this is helping our movement, what we're trying to do on the federal legislative level with the Ali Act. I think the one issue that McGregor is going to have is that he has no real boxing experience. He's a mixed martial artist. So finding a commission that is going to be willing to sanction him to fight arguably the best boxer in the world right now in Floyd Mayweather is going to be a problem. It's one thing to have a guy like James Toney get licensed in mixed martial arts, even though he had no real mixed martial arts background, which happened. Obviously, I fought him in Boston. Mm-hmm. Somebody sanctioned that event. I think James wasn't exactly, and nor was I, the number one guy in my weight class at that time. So maybe it was a little easier to sell. I think it's a little tougher to sell Mayweather-McGregor with McGregor's boxing experience. And it would be tougher to sell Mayweather-McGregor in a mixed martial arts competition to get Mayweather licensed and sanctioned that event in mixed martial arts. So that, I think, is the hurdle, is finding the commission that's going to be willing to sanction that fight and make it happen.
Do you think, Conor McGregor spoke recently in that 1 hour long pay-per-view Q&A where he seems to have come to some kind of understanding with the Nevada State Athletic Commission. He brings up points about how much money he brings into the state. Do you think that's something that might outweigh the negatives of Conor McGregor having such low experience in boxing? And there have been other commissions that have basically welcomed Conor McGregor. I'm not sure whether it was Nevada or New York, but others have welcomed him with open arms and said they'd be glad to give him a license and put together a big fight.
Yeah, well, and the question is, okay, not whether they'll let him box. I think they will let him box. Are they going to let him box Floyd Mayweather? That's the fight everybody wants to see. That's the fight he's pushing for. And I guess that's the question in my mind. Yeah, absolutely. Any place that is willing to hold that boxing or MMA match, any city is going to reap the rewards and the benefits of all the people that come and all the, the hotels and all the other stuff that surrounds a mixed martial arts fight. That's one of the reasons why we'd like to see the Ollie Act amended as well. Create an open market where these other promotions now that are basically bringing in 10%, maybe a little bit more of the revenue that comes in our sport, they don't have access to the top fights or can't even negotiate to promote those top fights and those top fighters to fight each other because they're all signed to exclusive contracts with the UFC. Imagine if it was an open market and it went to the highest bidder and it was a transparent market where they have to disclose how much money they made the last time I fought. Now I know what my value is, and I can say as a fighter, okay, you guys made this amount of money the last time we did this together. I want a little bit bigger piece of the pie. I want a little bit more of a percentage and make it a little more fair when we go and do this big fight. And we're both still going to make money, but I'm going to make a lot more than 10 or 13% of whatever comes in on that event as the athlete stepping up in the cage.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating time to be in the sport. Just quickly before we move on, I mean, we all remember that fight with James Toney that you had in the UFC when he came into MMA. How do you think McGregor's foray into boxing goes? Because some are saying he has a puncher's chance. Others are saying this will be a quick and brutal destruction by Floyd Mayweather. Where do you kind of sit on this whole thing?
Well, I think anybody that's a game fighter, and Conor McGregor is certainly a game fighter, has a puncher's chance. James Toney had a puncher's chance going into a mixed martial arts engagement with me. I wasn't silly enough to stand around in front of James or take James's skills for granted. He's a very, very, very good boxer. But I didn't think he could stop a low single, and it was then a question of how much did he learn in the weeks and months leading up to that fight on the ground outside of his realm of expertise. Now, there are not too many boxers in the world in the last 10 years that have been able to touch Floyd Mayweather. It is a bit crazy to think that Conor McGregor, as a mixed martial artist, not being able to kick, elbow, use clinch and dirty boxing tactics in a straight boxing match, is going to be able to go out against Floyd Mayweather and be any more successful than anybody else in the boxing world has been. So I think it's probably, certainly has, like I said, a puncher's chance. Everybody has that. And Conor's game, he's going to get in there and do it. So there's always that possibility. But rational thought will tell you that it's probably going to be a long night for Conor.
Well, regardless, if it does happen, hopefully everybody's going to walk away very rich. Randy, while we're talking about, obviously, issues with contracts, we wanted to touch on Mark Hunt's lawsuit against the UFC, Dana White, and Brock Lesnar. It's a pretty curious situation, especially with him competing at UFC 209. Given your experience with, obviously, lawsuits in the UFC and things like that, what do you think about Hunt's move to do this, and do you think he'll have any success?
Well, certainly it's a civil suit, and the civil law is a little bit different than them arguing over a contract. There's a little more leniency in the civil courts, and it's actually reasonable. And I think with timing of when things went public and what they knew when they knew it, which is what Mark's complaint is, that they knew Brock Lesnar was dirty before that fight, and they still allowed him to go out and fight. Is the grounds that he's suing the company on now. Are they going to get good lawyers and try to fight that tooth and nail? Absolutely. They don't want to set any precedents. But I understand where Mark's coming from, and I think, we as fighters all need to back him on that. Obviously it's changed since I competed. We didn't have USADA and all these other things going on, even 5 years ago when I was still competing. So I know seen what that looks like. I never had to report to anybody when I wanted to go on vacation or some of this other stuff that's being done with the athletes that are under contract right now. But I have to say I kind of agree with Mark Hunt's position. If they knew that he wasn't clean going into fight night, then that fight probably should have never happened. It shouldn't have been allowed to happen. So it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. Obviously, the class action lawsuit is a whole nother can of worms with the named plaintiffs listed, Kung Lee and Nate Corey and John Fitch and those guys all doing affidavits now on their experience with the anti-competitiveness of the UFC in general. And obviously class action suits can take a long time to settle, but they've got three of the biggest class action law firms in the country that have all signed on donating their time and energy. So they obviously feel pretty good about their position. 2017 is going to be a very interesting year for mixed martial arts. I think that, the sport exploded so quickly, became so popular so fast. Obviously since 2005 and the first season of The Ultimate Fighter, it's really been changed and skyrocketed on a global level. And it almost seems like there needs to be a bit of a correction. We've got 2, sometimes 3 shows every weekend now. It doesn't have the same, sex appeal or luster or whatever you want to call it that it had when there was 8 or 9 shows a year. And you kind of got to know those athletes and you wanted to see whether they were going to win or they were going to lose or what they were going to say in their interview. And, obviously guys like Chael Sonnen and now Conor McGregor took all that part of the marketing and the fight game to a whole new level in MMA. But I just think that, there's 80% of the fighters. I don't know who they are. I don't even know where they came from.
Yeah, it's definitely something that a lot of fans are echoing right now. So it's going to be a crazy year in MMA. Now, Randy, before we let you go, we want to talk about your acting career, which is a lot of exciting stuff going. And the first piece of exciting news that recently came out was there's going to be a 4th Expendables movie. Now, Stallone said everyone's expecting something different, and we're going to give it to him. Have you spoken to him yet about Toll Road's return to the movie?
I have spoken to him. Toll Road will absolutely be a big part of the story and
yes.
part of the team.
Excellent.
Going into Expendables 4. I'm excited to see the script. I have had a chance to talk to him a little bit about the direction he wants to head. So it'll be interesting when I actually see the script. I know he's working on that diligently now, and we're greenlit, it sounds like, for May, June timeframe to start filming. I have no idea who they're bringing in, where the story is going to take us, who's coming back. That's all been rumored. It's going to be really interesting. I'm excited.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that you don't know what's going to happen in this one just yet, but a lot of people for a long time have been saying they want to see Jackie Chan. Do you think there's any kind of chance that maybe this is the one where Jackie comes down and parties with the Expendables? And is there maybe someone that you'd like to see join the team?
I heard after Expendables 2 that Jackie Chan was being considered for Expendables 3, and that Jet Li might not come back. And then obviously Jet did come back and actually had a significant role and character in 3. So I'm not sure if I haven't heard anything new about Jackie since we were finished with 2 and looking at 3. I heard the Dwayne Johnson rumor. I heard the Hulk Hogan rumor. But I really have no official news. There's nothing I can say there.
It's one of those things where you guys have done the movies previously together. It just looks like you guys have such a fun time hanging out in between takes and while the movie's taking place when you go to all these different locations around the world. I mean, you'd be excited because it's a huge franchise and a huge movie, but is a part of you excited just because of the fact that you get to sort of hang out with your friends again for a period of time?
Absolutely. That's a huge piece of it. It's always fun to work, and sometimes you pinch yourself when you're suiting up and getting to do this thing but it's even more fun and a whole new level of fun. It's like old home week when all the guys come back together and we all get back on set and get to see each other, catch up, and work with each other again.
All right, Randy. Well, before we let you go, we have to ask, we know acting is going great. You've got a lot of things going on. You've got a movie called Bruja and the Lost City of the Gold coming out as well. But we have to ask this. With Fedor coming into Bellator and this being the age of legends fighting each other, you spoke about, it wasn't that long ago where you really had to think about whether you were going to take that fight or not, and you considered it. Is there still any chance you'd consider making a movie-style comeback and possibly fighting one more time, or will you be keeping your fighting to the big screen?
I think I'll keep my fighting to the big screen. Things are going well there. I'm happily retired. As we just discussed, I think the sport's changed a little bit, and I certainly could never see myself wearing the uniform. Obviously, Mitrione is getting a shot at Fedor coming up here in a couple months. That's going to be a really interesting matchup. And obviously, when Fedor came out and started fighting again, my phone blew up. With just that question, was I going to take that and come back? And this doesn't make sense. At 53 years old, I'm in great shape. Don't get me wrong, and I've held up pretty well. But great shape and fight shape are two different things. And having now not been in fight shape for 5.5, going on 6 years, it just doesn't make a lot of sense for me to risk trying to get back into fight shape and take a fight like that. I'm having too much fun doing what I'm doing.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, some big fights coming up on the big screen, some great movies coming out. Guys, it's going to be a huge year for Randy Couture. Make sure to follow him on Twitter at Randy_Couture and on Instagram at AXINATCH. Randy, thank you so much for coming onto the program. We're excited to see the new movies. We're excited to see what's next when it comes to MMA, Ali Act Reform, and we appreciate your time today. It's always a pleasure having you on the program.
Thanks. I appreciate it, guys. Take care.